Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our third session this afternoon on education, learning, and access. It's my pleasure now to hand over to the chair of this session, Dr. Melanie Gibson, who is a long-standing supporter of the postgraduate diploma in Asian art. Melanie has been tutor and convener on our Islamic module for many years, a long-standing lecturer, and now works at Ginkgo Publishing in an editorial capacity. So thank you very much, Melanie, for joining us today, for being a part of this celebration of Hetty's many accomplishments. And I'll now hand over to you to lead today's panel.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm in fact speaking to you all, good afternoon to you all, actually, or possibly whatever time it is for you, from Spain, which is rather wonderful. I've managed to leave wet England briefly. Most of you attending today know that as Malcolm just said, I ran the Islamic module for very many years. It gave me enormous pleasure doing that. But you perhaps don't know that, as with many of us here today, it was Hetty who gave me my academic start in life. She plucked me from my domestic life, from my young children, and said, come and give lectures on Islamic ceramics, which was my subject. And then she said, come and be the tutor. And with fear and trepidation, I started doing this, but within a very short time, I was absolutely loving what I was doing. And it's a mark of Hetty's incredible generosity and how far she will go for her students. And I was one of her students. I had met Hetty when I was doing an MA at SOAS, and I took 2 courses she was running on Mughal architecture and Mughal painting. And you won't be surprised to hear that in very short order, she had me completely entranced by these subjects. And I soon visited India very soon after that. So the only thing I'm now going to introduce my panelists on this penultimate panel today, this very wonderful day. But before that, I just want to reiterate how important the object-based aspect, this sort of visionary aspect that Hetty had in making this absolutely central to the diploma. And I really want to applaud her as an academic, as a pioneer in education, and I'm happy to say also as a dear friend. So our subject this afternoon in this panel is what defines best practice for learning, education, and access in the Asian art field. And our first speaker this afternoon is Thupten Kelsang, who is, of course, an alumnus of the diploma. He's now, however, a DPhil student at the School of Anthropology and Museum Ethnography at the University of Oxford, and that's where I think he's speaking to us from. And his research and practice focus on creating sustainable and equitable relationships between the Tibetan community and museums, seeking to counter the acute absence of Tibetan voices in the field. Thupten's doctoral research is supported by the Clarendon Fellowship, and he was also the recipient of the INLAX Fellowship of India. He has extensive experience in multiple roles within museums as a curator and a consultant, as a doctoral researcher, museum activist, and a community organizer. And he's been consulted by major cultural institutions such as the British Museum, the Pitt Rivers Museum, and the National Trust. Thupten works towards developing his initiative Tibetan Art Collective, speaking and consulting on Tibetan heritage at platforms such as the Kochi Museum Biennale and the Prince Claus Fund. So I have great pleasure in introducing Thupten and handing the floor over to him. Over to you, Thupten.
Thank you, Melanie, for your very kind introduction. Hello, everyone, classmates, friends, and teacher. And thank you, Malcolm and Hetty, for giving me this opportunity to participate on this sort of very significant day, honoring Hetila, who remains a very constant supporter of my work, a mentor, and a kind friend. It was sort of really good to hear from her today and her talking about Shalabhanjika Yakshi. I thought sort of brought us back to our old diploma years, which was only, I think, 4 years ago now. And responding to the topic of this panel, through my presentation, I will try to highlight the 3 aspects of the diploma itself, which I feel constitutes one of the best practices for learning, education, and access in the Asian art field. Oops, sorry. I would like to start off with thinking about the broader field at the intersection of art, museum and heritage, which seem to be in a state of flux recently. Debates around the ownership of cultural heritage and repatriation have been raging for a very long time. But these debates have become increasingly visible, as well as polarizing in the public domain, leading to attempts to redefine the term museum itself by ICOM. And these are some of the featured headlines, which are symptomatic of the current hyper-visible debates in the public domain around colonial histories, looted objects, and cultural restitution. And as I said before, they've become increasingly polarizing and distant to each other, sometimes occurring in their own echo chambers. But the remit of decolonizing museums and reflecting on the institutional implications of colonialism is definitely gaining currency. Large British institutions such as the National Trust and others are undertaking research on the same. Museums are creating exciting new positions. There's even a shift in the funding regimes in academia. And even nation states are deaccessioning museum objects and returning stolen heritage. But these debates continue to be framed within the context of nation states and at times hence can lack nuance. This momentum on such discourse, which is very hyper-visible and in the public domain, also leads to more posturing and increased polarization. This can often also create essentialized binaries, or sometimes advocates for reductive one-size-fits-all solutions. And there's often a conflation of issues around diversity and decolonization, which are not the same thing. Before proceeding, I'd like to again talk about the context which I work in. Most of you would be aware that Tibetan objects are very hyper-visible in the field, in museums as well as the art market. Exhibitions of Tibetan art and displays are regular occurrence in the exhibition circuit. And Tibetan objects seem to be present at every auction of Asian art, every season, at times, as you know, fetching record prices. So this begs the very key question, why is so much of Tibetan material culture circulating outside of Tibet, outside the hands of Tibetan, and not in the original places of worship or practice? So this quote from my supervisor and mentor, Professor Claire Harris's book, underlines the context of my research. Additionally, in stark contrast to the developments in mainstream museum discourse and practice, Tibetan material culture in the museum, for some reason, continues to be perceived largely as one of antiquity, located only in a rich tradition and a religious past. It's as if the representation of Tibetan culture are frozen in time, in some way perpetuating a Shangri-La of sorts, a Shangri-La in the museums. And while there's an increasing acknowledgement of a museum's obligation to involve source community in the representation and display of the cultures, the Tibetan context again remains relatively immune to such agendas. So the question grounding my study and research is, why are dominant narratives on Tibet and its material heritage disconnected from the lived realities of Tibetan communities, as well as ongoing discourse on decolonizing museums? Reflecting on the past debates, public debates, I feel that there's an intrinsic need to, again, ground them back in the histories of research, discourse, and practice. And this really brings me back to my diploma years, which has been the foundation for my academic and professional journey. I strongly recall the assigned readings around aniconism, as you can see here, in the beginning of the Indian art module, the very, in some way, heated back and forth between multiple scholars and multiple positionalities. At the time, I didn't really realize it, but essentially through its diversity of lecturers, subject experts, and readings, it was helping me understand epistemology, how art, the canon of art history itself, and museums are never truly neutral, how multiple positionalities influence it, shape it, impose it, sustain it, and hopefully alter it. And before decolonizing the curriculum became such a mainstream topic, the diploma helped me understand what could constitute what Spivak terms as epistemic violence in the Tibetan context, as well as critically unpack the role of art and museums in the public domain. This diploma also allowed me to cultivate a nuanced approach to the issues I tackle in the museum as a researcher, as a community consultant, and as a museum activist, accommodating, decentering myself and accommodating and bringing forth multiple voices from the community, which is also not a monolith, and as well as being acutely cognizant of my own positionality. However, I always remember the importance of dialogue, as both Naman and Hetty advocate for. Again, moving away from this essentialization that anybody has the right answer, and to truly believe in the collaborative spirit of academia and research. Another significant aspect of the diploma is its object-based research approach through multiple handling sessions in museums and galleries. As a Tibetan born in India, these sessions were actually the first time I encountered historic Tibetan objects, enabling me in some way to rediscover my own heritage in UK. This created a very deep desire to understand and reconnect to the Tibetan collections in museums, not only in a very individual or personal capacity, but to also foster re-engagement between the Tibetan community and its displaced heritage in museums. And in some way, this became a responsibility of sorts, as well as being one of the first students from my community to pursue this field. So this desire was actually actualized in my pilot project in 2018, re-engaging Tibetan material heritage, which this enabled a group of Tibetans, artists, community leaders, and students to participate in a series of object handling sessions and talks given by curators and academics at SOAS, the Pitt Rivers Museum, the British Museum, and the V&A. Building on my pilot project, I was supposed to organize museum workshops in the UK for my fieldwork, but due to, as with everything, due to the continued impact of the pandemic, like this diploma, my research also took a digital turn. But it also meant that I'm able to widen the scope of participation, to be able to consult and collaborate with transnational Tibetan diaspora, and also to develop increased precision and improve methodology in recruiting participants. This diploma is all about relationships, linkages, creating communities, not just academic, but creating an ecosystem which nurtures discourse, collaboration, and capacity building, as it's sort of, you can see through its network in Southeast Asia. It's through these institutional linkages from the diploma, which has enabled me to work with the British Museum, the V&A, and other such institutions. This has also inspired me to create institutional linkages through my own practice between museums in the global north and the Tibetan community, mostly resident in India, to create access. Like the diploma, my research remains very grounded in practice, with an aspiration to create an institutional ecosystem within the community, with a shared long-term vision which fosters collaboration, creates grassroots impact, and sustains the living Tibetan culture. You can see it here. I will always remain sort of very grateful to the postgraduate diploma and to Hetty's vision and support and belief, actually, which impacts not just individuals such as myself, but to the broader communities that we represent and come from. And as a representative of the 2015 batch of the diploma, we really thank you for inspiring us and bringing us all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Thupten, and thank you for speaking so movingly and so passionately about your personal experience of the diploma, and also for bringing up again the importance of the objects and of the object handling and your very specific reaction to that. Thank you very much indeed. So our next speaker this afternoon is Peter Sharrock, who is known incredibly well to most of you, I'm sure. He's the tutor of the postgraduate diploma's Southeast Asian Art module. He's also a lecturer, lectures on the history of art and archaeology of Southeast Asia at SOAS. He experienced the war in Vietnam and Cambodia as a Reuters correspondent, and he formed deep bonds with the cultures of the region. And his PhD, which he took at SOAS, proposed a new interpretation of the Buddhism and politics of the greatest king of ancient Cambodia, Jayavarman VII. And his subsequent publications have tracked through the sacred art and architecture, the spread of Tantric Buddhism and Shaivism in the magnificent temple complexes of Asia's maritime states. So the kind of nexus of all of this is the fact that Peter, on a visit to Myanmar with a group of former diploma students, when the universities were closed after monks had marched against the military government, he and the alumnus Fred Eichener, president of the Alphawood Foundation in Chicago, devised a program to provide scholarships, and this has been mentioned already today. But it was the donation of that huge donation of 20 million to SOAS, and over the last 6 years has allowed nearly 100 scholars to attend art history courses at SOAS before returning back to their universities, museums, ministries, and cultural organizations, and spreading, taking their knowledge with them. The scholarships continue, and Peter is a board member of the SOAS Southeast Asian Art Academic Program. And I would like now to hand over to Peter for him to speak. Over to you, Peter.
So thank you, Melanie, and thank you everyone for turning up. It's been a really moving occasion, not only for Hetty, but for many of us, I know. I've heard several times through this that this diploma course is so deep, gets so deep into art and so many art cultures around the world that it's proved pivotal and life-changing for many of us. That makes it quite extraordinary. My own path was odd. It went from Fleet Street to Wall Street to SOAS Diploma and Hetty. Hetty's warmth, personal engagement, and constant encouragement blend the qualities of teacher, strategist, and ever-resourceful problem fixer. These qualities emerge in her relentless hard work, passionate engagement, we've been hearing it today, commercial flair, and budgetary mindfulness. A network of contacts in the art world, in academia, in the museum world, in the US, in the UK, and in India is extraordinary. And that is what enriches the diploma modules with a galaxy of international academics, curators, and art world participants. So many students and alumni have told me that the SOAS diplomas are incomparably richer than anything they have found offered anywhere else in Europe, or indeed in the US or Asia. Now, successful art education programs, students stay in touch with them. They take breaks for family reasons and business reasons, etc. They come back and they come back and again, particularly as new modules developed. And indeed, the diploma array of modules has developed remarkably in the time that I've been associated with it. And that evolution continues. And I must say that Malcolm is a very promising successor to Hetty, with lots of ideas in technology and with presentation ideas, which I think are going to be very fruitful for the diploma. Just pre-COVID, the diploma was about to blossom into a new field of taking students after short courses into the countries where to see the art for themselves. I hope that as COVID shows some signs of receding, that we can start looking forward to that again, perhaps next year. The silken web that Hetty effortlessly spins is sticky, but it's also robust. Over a quarter of a century, it has weathered the storms in SOAS and in the British Museum. I watched the diploma survive a brief but jolting move to the British Museum before a second jolt propelled it back to SOAS, where it has managed to keep the School of Arts afloat with 10 or so MA candidates a year, followed by another half dozen or so a year from the Southeast Asian Art Program. And I'm here just to say a few words about SAP, about the Southeast Asian Program. Now, who is listening in? A media entrepreneur from Chicago and president of the Alphawood Foundation. Fred took the Southeast Asia module in 2009 after his brilliant friend Tommy Gur sang the praises of the Indian and Chinese modules. And despite running a large business, Fred managed to write a brilliant engineering paper on what it must have taken in people, elephants, crafts, quarries, etc., to build Angkor Wat in Cambodia in the 12th century. It was a brilliant, unique study, highly original, and I'm still working on Fred to allow me to publish it somewhere. As Melanie said, on a diploma, on a tour with diploma alumni, after Fred was on that course in 2009, we went to Myanmar, as many other tourists were starting to do, as it opened up under Aung San Suu Kyi. And I see we've still got a couple of alumni from Yangon online with us here. And I so enjoyed listening to Tien Ting Aung talk about what she'd learned from Japanese lacquer that she can take back to the family business she works in Myanmar. She's an artist, she's a lacquer artist, a real talent, and a really wonderful person. On this tour of Myanmar, we did indeed stop outside the university campus, which had been closed down after, you may recall, the monks had marched in the streets to protest against the actions of the then military junta. Sadly, we're under a second one at present. But standing beside the bus, Fred asked me, as we talked about the situation there, Peter, is there anything we could do to help students in the region whose education suffers from the consequences of war and politics? I said, if we strengthen SOAS Southeast Asian teaching, it was fairly thin at that time, we could help build the next generation of scholars by bringing them to SOAS. We talked this through at length, and after some time, he said, send me a draft. I did. His response a few weeks later was, Peter, you sent me the Mercedes version. Now send me the Rolls Royce. So I doubled the numbers. Since then, as Melanie said, we've had 100 scholars come to London, many of them taking the advantage of the English language course in SOAS first, and then going through the diploma modules and MA classes, and some are still working on their PhDs. The diploma, MA, and MA classes have all been enriched for 7 years by their enthusiasm and their immense local knowledge of students who are now back in their countries, most of them, advancing their careers and strengthening their institutions. We're now working on strengthening the infrastructure of the alumni network with some more funding and a program to organize seminars, conferences, fixing conference panels, alumni panels to go to international conferences in the region, and coaching on key professional matters like how to get published in journals and how to curate cultures. SOAS has got a very good expert in curating cultures now. That's Stephen Murphy, who worked with John Guy in the New York Met after his PhD in SOAS, and then was a senior curator in the Asian Civilization Museum in Singapore. So someone with his PhD was on Northeast Thailand, the Sema culture of Northeast Thailand. So we've got a real Southeast Asian expert and a real museum expert. And some of our contacts in the region have noticed this and are asking us whether we can put that into our package of professional development for the alumni network. So the Southeast Asian program is producing academic publications, working with museums on producing international standard catalogs. Many of the museums were set up in the colonial era, and some really tremendous work was done in those days, but that is many decades ago. And the collections have continued to grow, and the archaeology has gone on. So very few of the museums in the region have up-to-date international standard catalogs, and that we can help with. We've also launched the Pratu Postgraduate Journal, whose first issue is out there, and we're looking for additional pieces. So there is one journal which is very much geared to getting alumni into print. And also a series of webinars. Webinars are being run on the SOAS website, which you should keep an eye out for if you haven't run into them already. Very, very excellent work being done there. The diploma has proven to be a real blessing for Alphawood scholars. Few of their home universities look across the borders at the cultures of neighboring states. It takes a lot of resource to get that. When they come to the diploma, they climb aboard a helicopter to get a higher level view and a much wider view after a great deal of reading. The diploma, drawing on world-class input from universities and museums around the world, provides incomparably rich teaching. Many, many of our students attest to this. The diploma has a world audience because there is nothing comparable elsewhere. We hear it all the time. 2 lectures a day from world experts, 4 days a week, with weekly one-on-one tutorials. It's far more than 1 lecture a week that you can anticipate in most master's programs. What Hetty has put together over more than 2 decades deserves to be truly celebrated. It's a magnificent achievement. Hetty always insists it's a team effort, and it is and has been. We think of the wonderful years we had being kept in line by Denise Ackford. Now the technology of the diploma has been marvelously upgraded by Patrick Munger and Joe Dixon. But Hetty's passion for art and her drive to get the best for her students is at the core of this achievement. And that remains marvelously rooted in all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for really filling in the gaps and giving us the colour of exactly how the Southeast Asian Art Programme, academic programme, was set up, and also for giving us an idea of the projects that you'll be involved with in the future, your ambitions, and showing us how far it's going to go. I don't know if anybody today has actually introduced Malcolm. I'm sure they probably have. I had to miss part of the beginning of the day. You all know him. He's filled Hetty's shoes, which were very difficult to fill, in an incredibly agile and really successful year, and also in a year which has been astonishingly difficult from very many aspects. He joined SOAS from Christie's, where for 3 years, he was a specialist in Chinese painting, and he's worked in many different fields at leading museums and cultural institutions in the UK and Asia. He has a PhD and an MA from SOAS and an MA from Cambridge as well in Chinese. He has strong research and teaching interests, which come through very much in the way he's working now on the diploma, in Chinese and Buddhist visual culture, in text-image relationships, and in the study of curation and display. He's absolutely committed to object-based learning, which is why he was the anointed heir to Hetty, of course, who pioneered this idea, and is working with colleagues in SOAS and in the wider academic community to develop this area of teaching. And so I have the greatest of pleasure in introducing to you and asking Malcolm now to take the floor and to speak to us all.
Melanie, thank you so much, and thank you also, to Hetty for all that she's done in setting up the program. And indeed, as Melanie was just saying there in her introduction, this has been a very distinctive year in which to take on this role, and working really with Hetty over the past 12 months to shore up her legacy in this program. But in some ways, although there have been many challenges that have arisen out of the digital pivot, as some have described it, to the delivery of our courses this year, I have on one level sometimes quite privately welcomed the distinction of how we have had to deliver things this year, that no one can compare what we have been doing this year so directly to Hetty's legacy in some senses, to have the flexibility and the need to not be so directly compared to someone who's done so much for so many for so long. So with that kind of preamble in mind, I'd like to share with you a few thoughts of mine on the kind of the topic we're looking at today. So give me a moment just to launch my slideshow. So as you know, today's panel is a discussion of learning, education, and access. And Melanie has kindly kind of set the theme for us in the beginning of the panel by asking what defines best practice for learning, education, and access in the Asian art field. And here I wanted to really focus in on the specifics of the diploma and its move to the digital in many senses over the past 12 months as the way of framing my response to this question. What is it we are striving for? What is it we're seeking to achieve? What are our core values as educators on the postgraduate diploma? And I very much use the plural here, as I am one among a team of many talented people, many of whom are much more experienced than I am within the field, many more years under the belt as teachers. And I really welcome the opportunity to learn with them and from them and to work with them. So with this kind of framing device of the postgraduate diploma in Asian art and our course is the core focus for this discussion, I wanted to think briefly about what these core values might be, or core principles might be of the best practice. What are we striving to achieve in the huge range of material that we're looking at? And really, there are three core elements that I want to speak to today. I won't kind of break them down one by one, but these are the themes that I'm speaking to in each of the elements of the teaching that I'll showcase for you that we've managed to deliver over the past 12 months. So the first kind of core principle of best practice is an embracing of complexity. The range of material covered on this course is vast. Both chronologically and geographically, there is a scope, a scale, and an ambition, and an offering that is at times intimidating, both for the teachers and the students. And I think an openness to that complexity and allowing it to remain complex and at times not fully resolved is a core mindset to hold, whether you're an educator or a student on our courses. Another core principle is being open to collaboration. As this study day, as the speed with which people responded to our invitations really testifies, this is a community of collaborators that have shaped the diploma over the years with Hetty at the helm. And that openness to collaboration, that willingness to work together with institutions, whether it's the formal association we have with the British Museum and the V&A, whether it's to work with colleagues, I think it's a really distinctive and very powerful part of our teaching that all our modules are co-taught. Every course has two conveners who work in dialogue with one another and in support of one another to deliver the best possible learning experience, as well as the collaboration between teacher and student and with guest lecturers from all across the world, made possible by the kind of digital pivot this year, even more so than in the past. And really the third principle I want to focus in on, perhaps towards the end of this short discussion, is on the value of listening carefully and closely to our colleagues, our students, and the many supporters we have of our program. So this is the kind of the core themes that I'll be speaking to over the next few minutes. So in terms of that complexity, what does this complexity come down to? What are the biggest challenges in a way that we're facing or that I felt I was facing in coming into this post just over a year ago now? And as I said, it's the diversity of cultures and the diversity of materials that we present to the world, to our now ever more global audience of students on the postgraduate diploma, that is perhaps one of the greatest challenges and opportunities for us. But embracing that diversity, acknowledging its distinctiveness, or the distinctive kinds of material, of contexts and identities, and allowing our students to encounter them on a variety of terms is a key principle here. So a diversity of material, which is never homogenized, never grouped together as one singular image of Asia, but instead is a kind of a multiplicity of forms, images, experiences, cultures, and really helps us to move beyond the object, to reveal and to think about the various peoples who might otherwise be obscured from our memory and our history. So that diversity of cultures and materials and retaining its range of distinction is a key principle for me as an educator, and I believe for everyone else who contributes to the diploma. And we achieve that not only by covering a broad range of material, but by inviting a hugely diverse range of voices and approaches to shape our programs. Just on this slide alone, you have 4 images of contributors to our modules this year who come from very different institutional perspectives and bring very different trainings, frameworks, or points of departure for not only what an art historical approach might be, but even what the object in front of them can, should, and will mean to the various viewers. So here we have examples of an auction house specialist, my former colleague Cecilia Zi, who kindly contributed to our Buddhist art module this year, who joined us for a discussion of the commodification, curation and collecting of Buddhist art. We have Rose Kerr, the curator emerita of the Asian collections at the V&A, running a handling session for us on song ceramics. We have also Professor Shane McCausland, who opened the day for us today with his reminiscences about Hetty, who's contributed to several of our modules, giving insights into the visual cultures and material cultures of not only of China, but of a kind of a pan-Asian view. And we also have Lama Rigzin, who joined us again on the Buddhist module to give us a practitioner's perspective on the meaning of Buddhist art and Buddhist art objects. So he spoke to us both as a senior monastic figure within the Tibetan Sangha, but also as a practicing religious artist and tanka painter. So this is just one small snapshot of the range of voices and approaches that join our program and contribute to our courses. And at the center of this is object-based learning. So within this panoply of perspectives, approaches, ways of thinking, and points of departure, we share one thing in common. And that is that we are beginning with the object. Not the object as a discrete, contained world unto itself of connoisseurship and kind of fetishized value in the physical form of a material trace of a past culture. But for the diploma and for Hetty's legacy, object-based learning, as she said herself, is perhaps about thinking of objects as catalysts, thinking of material, visual culture, art or archaeology as a way of entering and reconstructing the worlds and lived experiences of people who might otherwise be forgotten. taking the object as a way of beginning, but building those contexts through a deep understanding of those material traces. And as we heard in the keynote lecture this morning from Professor Namanahuja, that combination of contextualized study and careful consideration of an object's history is not contradictory to connoisseurly skills. It's not contradictory to visual literacy or object literacy, but in fact, they go hand in hand, as he deftly demonstrated in the examples of damage inflicted upon Jain architecture or damage sustained by Jain sculpture, which in an understanding of the materiality, the knowledge that could be acquired through a connoisseurly training, he was able to articulate for us so eloquently and so evocatively the material and physical experience that would have been required to create that alteration to the image he was presenting us with. So object-based learning is at the core of what the diploma does. It brings together this diversity of approaches and ways of thinking, and it is in itself a kind of a catalyst for embracing and engaging with complexity. But the way we deliver it at the postgraduate diploma in Asian art on our courses is really centered on collaboration. In the past year, with this digital pivot, we've had to take a number of approaches to make sure that this core component of what we do was delivered effectively and in a meaningful way to our ever more global audience, without the possibility of bringing them to Bloomsbury or South Kensington, Oxford or Cambridge or any of the locations we would otherwise normally have visited to look at objects in person in the museums, galleries and stores. So we were faced with quite a challenge around a year ago. And in moving object-based learning online, the first core principle for myself, for Hetty, for Patrick, for Joe, and indeed for all the conveners who've worked on the various modules with us throughout the year, was to make sure that object-based learning and an object-based approach remained integral and central to the course. That was partly in the way we structured and delivered all of our individual instances of teaching, but it was also in the way that we worked with our partners, in the relationships that really I and my colleagues inherited from Hetty, and were able to draw on very quickly and very deftly to build a cohesive and engaging program that, according to some students, in fact, offered new and even deeper kinds of engagement with materials and objects. And those were particularly through the support of curatorial colleagues, both in the UK, particularly at the V&A and the British Museum, but also internationally in a wide range of institutions. We put together online study sessions, which in some cases were recorded in person at a very high quality of production, enabling you to see the object in the round, to watch the curator manipulate it in their hand, and to hear their account of the object's physical qualities, its haptic properties, its weight, its texture, and perhaps even its smell. So all of this was brought to life through the real kind of partnership and support of our museum associates in the V&A and the British Museum. Also, where we weren't able to get into the stores for health and safety reasons to record, we put together virtual viewing sessions where curators, both within the UK and indeed internationally, would join us to present selected items from their collections and speak to them as though we were in the room with them, giving us that kind of narrative journey of moving through a museum space, but evoked through imagery, and taking us into that hallowed sanctum of the museum store, and giving to our students as much of that emotional experience of engagement with the art that we've heard so many people reflecting on today. And all of this was underscored by discussions of collection histories and introductions of critical approaches to objects and their histories, which in fact we've been hearing about just in our past panel, with Thupten's reflections on his work in museums. In this panel, in Thupten's reflections on his work with engagement with the Tibetan diaspora community. So all of this really came together through a combination of embracing complexity, ensuring that we retained the broad range of material we wanted to bring to our course, but also being open to collaborations. And again, I'd like to really thank very publicly and also very personally the curatorial and administrative colleagues at the V&A and the British Museum who made all of this happen for us this year. And indeed, the particular thanks to Peter Kellner of the V&A, who you see on the slide on the right-hand side here, holding up this camera. He produced an amazing array of films for us in partnership with the curators there. So these videos that I and my colleagues had the privilege to attend the filming of, in some cases, were a wonderful insight into the museum collections and have been really warmly received by our students. But I also want to thank the numerous contributors who've been part of our programs this year in museums across Europe, universities across the world, and indeed many new contributors in 2020, 2021. And indeed, this has opened up new possibilities for students. One of our scholarship students this year, Teresa, whose testimony is up here for you to read if you wish to spend some time on it. It's also published in our current prospectus. And it shows here this wonderful example of the, or in Teresa's testimony, she speaks to the way that online teaching had opened up new possibilities for her. So in listening to this, in acknowledging and hearing how important it had been for students like Teresa and many others to be able to study with us online, we've made a commitment in the coming year to ensure that in 2021, 2022, all of our courses remain fully accessible online from anywhere in the world on our full-time modules. So for those of you who are considering joining us or who have not yet completed your diploma or simply want to come back and study with us again, then there is a pathway for you wherever you may be to take this course on your own terms. And with that in mind, I want to bring my presentation to a close, to thank Melanie and Peter and Thupten as my fellow panelists and chair, and indeed to thank Hetty as well, once again, for all she's done in making this opportunity possible for us as students and as educators to build on her legacy in the years ahead. So thank you once again.
I wonder if I could just very quickly say thank Malcolm and thank Thupten and Peter and Melanie, even though she's not in the UK, for being here, doing so much with me for so many years and being here to moderate this today. So I just wanted to sort of interrupt a minute. I'll shut up now, but thank all of you.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world, Hetty. Even though I'm away, very lucky to be away. I wanted to thank Malcolm for so eloquently describing the challenges of last year and for making it seem as if it was even better than it had been in person. And also for really that incredibly impressive list of new institutions who've become involved with the diploma, which is really very impressive and augurs incredibly well for the future. We've actually got about 8 minutes, no more than that, for questions. And I would like to ask a question of, well, actually, Hetty, do you want to have an opportunity to speak? I'm very happy to give you the floor. All right, well, in that case, sorry, you're muted, Hetty, I can't hear you.
Sorry, what is so great is that Malcolm has really been able to sort of turn it round and make such an incredible positive new direction for the diploma, which is both in the future going to be extremely important with all the type of learning that we will offer. So I just want to say, yeah, please do carry on, Melanie. I just want to concur with that.
Good. Well, so I've got just a question which follows on very much from what Malcolm was saying, and I'm asking it of Thupten, of Peter, and of Malcolm, just for a couple of minutes from each of you, just to really describe to me what is the high point, what was the high point of this new form of learning for you that we all kind of had to sort of tumble into last year, and as this wonderful word, this pivot into. So Thupten, what was it like for you? What was the high point for you?
I'd like to mention the high point and the low point as well, I think, because my fieldwork is still continuing. The high point, like I said, it's, I think sometimes when people, the so-called community consultation and collaboration, people can sometimes, just advertise it on social media and Twitter. So there is inherently no methodology as such. And I think that's very important that whether in theory or in practice, there needs to be a certain critical methodology incorporated, that why are these people representing a so-called community, because that's again a very, a community is not a heterogeneous entity. So I think that's what essentially that I'd like to develop within my own case study, and hopefully it sort of brings forth and informs the greater field as well, that there can be a precision achieved in understanding what community voice is and unpacking that rather than just throwing on these words. But again, the problem here, it comes in that, like I said, the object sessions were a very sort of key element of my methodology, but now I'm unable to recreate that. And even most of the institutions don't have the technical setup to facilitate an interactive object session. And that's sort of still the struggle which is going on right now. Thank you. You're muted, Melanie.
Peter, what was the high point of this new form of teaching for you?
There were a number of high points. It was I was the guinea pig. I did the Southeast Asian module with about 2 days notice online with Patrick working away furiously in the background to keep it going. And it was fun. It was good. But I must say, when I came back for the Buddhist module, which has just ended, the whole thing had got matured. And it was really enriched. I was so impressed listening to some of the curators in New York, in London, going around the objects they are so attached to and speaking a depth and with an intimacy it was almost better than the old museum visits. They were so concentrated in putting across their thoughts and their message and summarizing all the stuff that they'd written in catalogs and publications for the years. It was sort of an intensification of the individual and the relationship with the objects. That was one thing. It was wonderful. Those filmed curators going around their own collections with no public around, no distractions. And the other thing is, I would say, it's that one thing COVID has done to us is it's all, we're all stationary. We're all reachable. And the time zones have spread with ease. So believe it or not, we had people in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, and it was all working. And of course, across Europe, but in the United States, even West Coast. Now, that means getting up very early. But I must say that the way Malcolm has made it interactive, it's in a way more interactive than a classroom. A classroom, you're racing to get through the material. There's never enough time, too many slides and so on. But Malcolm has a very good technique of throw a question into the chat anytime, raise your finger, and that's the way it works. And there we were, an intensely engaged group from Hong Kong to Florida, discussing things, arguing points, going deeper, learning from each other with an intensity that, frankly, I found remarkable. Now, the other thing about COVID and being stationary is that we could go to world experts who were not traveling somewhere or doing something else and beyond reach. Everyone is suddenly reachable, and we really got the top names in the subjects to come and talk to us. And that was quite exceptional. So and I must say, my hat off to the internet engineers, the quality of the sound and the interactions, it goes up and down now and again. But my goodness, we heard what people were expressing in Myanmar and in Hong Kong and in Florida. And we were all across the time zones engaged in really, really valuable personal discussions. So it all worked this time. This Buddhist module was incredibly successful. And guess what? The result is the exam work was fantastic. We've had to adapt the way we do it. We don't do it in a classroom with a vigilator. You can go off and look at things, but we've got a new way of dealing with it. And it seems to work very well. And the essays that were written, and thank goodness so much is available over the internet these days, that students in Myanmar can, with so many PDFs we can load upon them. I mean, they've had huge amounts of reading, and it's all been available. There's more and more and more. Books are on the internet. It's quite extraordinary. These are the advantages. The disadvantages, it's humanity's creativity in responding to COVID, I think, to the plague, to disaster. And we're coming out successfully. We're coming out with wonderful engagements. I mean, I've been teaching for a long, long time, this diploma course in SOAS. And I must say, I enjoyed this Buddhist art module as much as any, maybe more. It was truly exceptional. And with that, that's, you know, Patrick, thank you for all the background work that you've done that we can't see and that we're
That's a very timely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very timely to thank Patrick.
Also, thank you for Joe. Joe Dixon is a wonderful asset to the team. So efficient, so helpful, always there with a smile. Coming up, thinking ahead of you. Really, it's been a wonderful team experience. It really has. We're missing some of the past team members, but my goodness, I was really encouraged by the last module. Fantastic.
Peter, thank you for speaking in such a positive way, making us. I mean, that's a wonderful testimonial to the what Malcolm and everybody, the entire team has managed this year. I'm just going to take 30 seconds to thank Hetty for everything. It's been a fantastic journey with you all through these years. I've absolutely loved it. You've taught me a huge amount. Have a fantastic retirement. We'll be in touch though. And Malcolm, and thank you for inviting me to moderate this panel. It's given me enormous pleasure to be able to contribute a little bit. And over to you, Malcolm.
Can I just interrupt, please? No, sorry, Melanie. I just want to say that Stacey is there. And I have to say that in times of difficulty and when I wanted a sane opinion, apart from all her teaching and her consistent loyalty, Stacey's always been there as a go-to person in moments of uncertainty. So thank you, Stacey, for all you've done for the course and for me.
Well, Hetty, thank you so much. And Melanie, Peter, for those waves of enthusiasm. That's quite moving. And I would really stress, you know, that thank you to the whole team, to everyone who's convened the modules, to Joe, to Patrick, to Hetty, to our conveners Sandra and Emily for the Indian art module, for Elaine who worked so closely with me on putting together the China module this year, Peter for co-convening the Buddhist art module, and Kyoko and Monica for their exceptional work on the Japanese and Korean art module. All of these accomplishments are a team effort. As I said, it's really about a collaborative process that has embraced complexity and celebrated complexity. But if I could distill Peter's kind of waves of enthusiasm down to one single word, because I really agree with his sentiments there about the positive elements that we've achieved. If I could put that into one single word, it would be access. It is the way that we have opened, when I say we, I mean we as the inclusive diploma community of alumni and teaching staff have made it possible for so many more people to join. It's every WhatsApp message, every coffee where you tell someone about a positive experience you've had in the course. It's the kind of the personal and digital network and community of people across the world that have made access possible, whether through personal recommendation or all the way through to transformative donations, which have reshaped not only the diploma, but SOAS itself. So with that kind of sentiment in mind, I'd want to kind of circle back to the comments I made earlier today, just to mention once more that we have kind of relaunched a drive to fundraise in Hetty's name for the Dr. Heather Elgood Scholarship, which we've already received substantial donations toward, have a £10,000 anonymous match donation pledge. So anything that any of you give will be doubled up to £10,000 in supporting Hetty's legacy for access in this really important scholarship program. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to Patrick now briefly to play a short video with a testimonial from this year's Heather Elgood scholar, Saran Substanti-Wongs, who has just completed his final module. So Patrick, over to you to play a short testimonial from Sarah.
Hello, my name is Saran Substanti-Wongs. I'm a student from Thailand. I'm Dr. Heather Elgood Scholarship student for the year 2020 to 2021. I would like to thank Dr. Heather Elgood and also Ida Cho and Gretchen Welsh for initiating this scholarship for students. It has been a tremendous, rewarding experience being part of this course. My background has been in Sanskrit studies, where I used to study texts and the dating of the texts. And it's now a very good opportunity for me to learn art of India, China, and the rest of Southeast Asia, where I can use my experience in textual studies to complement the art, and which I can use to put the art into context, and I can use the art to also date for the dating of the text. I would love to work in art history and also in textual studies, where I can use the knowledge in both fields to complement each other. Thank you again for letting me a part of this big family. And I hope that the scholarship will continue to nurture students from around the world for the course. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Saran for that testimonial. And now I'd like to hand over, just with in mind the future opportunities that the diploma can lead you onto. One of the most tried and tested routes that we offer for our students is to move on to the MA programs offered in the School of Arts at SOAS. And with that in mind, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Stacey Pearson, Reader in the History of Chinese Ceramics at SOAS, an alumni of the PG Diploma, no less, and also the convener of the MA program in the History of Art and Archaeology at SOAS. So Stacey, thank you so much for joining us bright and early from California, while on leave, no less. So thank you very much for being here, and over to you to say a few words about the diploma program and its potential route forward into the MA.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And, I would like to extend my great thanks to Hetty for your support and everything you've done for me over the years. And I would also like to suggest that another word we should bear in mind is opportunity. We've just heard about the opportunity a student has had to further their knowledge and move into the history of art. I also benefited from the opportunities provided by the program that Hetty started. And this was almost 30 years ago, I think, when Hetty's program enabled me to change my area of specialization from Western art history and a bit of chemistry to Asian art. And with that foundation, I was able to go on and do further study and basically end up in the career as a specialist in Chinese ceramics that I have now. And over the years, many students have gone on from the diploma program into the MA program at SOAS. It really is a kind of natural progression for those who want to do further study, for those who want to, like I did, change their area of specialization, or those who are already professionals working in the field who want to develop their knowledge. And the MA program today is very different from the one that I was a student in all those years ago. And it's even better because it provides a wider range of MA degree pathways that you can take. And we've also added new ones. So at the moment, the History of Art and Archaeology department, which was very small when I first joined, is now part of the magnificent School of Arts at SOAS. And this brings in other areas of specialization as well as other opportunities. So within the School of Arts, we have 7 MA degree programs. Some of them are regionally focused, others are more focused on particular subject areas. So within the regionally focused one, you could opt to study the history of art and archaeology of East Asia. And that one also provides the opportunity to study an intensive language if you extend it by a year. We also have another regional one is the history of art and archaeology, history of art and architecture, of the Islamic Middle East. And that's another one that you can add an intensive language to the program should you wish. Now, the MA program that I'm convener for is a more general one that enables you to pursue all the regions that we cover. So that's Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, with courses focusing on art history, some with more of an archaeological focus. So we find that those students who are more interested in archaeology will tend to take that program. And then we have newer programs, including a very brand new one called Curating Cultures. And this one is a more museological focused degree. And it really provides a background in the display and curating of global arts and practices across the world. And then finally, we also have an MA in Global Creative and Cultural Industries. And that is almost unique in the sense that it has a global focus, and you can pursue interests in heritage studies, you can look at film, you can look at radio. It really encompasses a wide range of cultural industries. And for all of our MA programs, we find that students go on to really enriching, challenging and rewarding careers. And I would include myself in that, even though it's obviously I'm still at SOAS, that says something about the joy of being at SOAS as an institution. And this is really the one place where I could teach my subject in the whole world, and have a job title that reflects that. And I attribute all of that to the opportunities that the diploma was enabled me to pursue. And so that's my final thanks to Hetty, and I encourage anyone who's interested in coming to do the MA to look at our website. You can find all the information on soas.ac.uk/art/program, or you can get in touch with me. I'm at sp17@soas.ac.uk. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Wonderful to hear your own kind of memories and also the kind of the opportunities that the MA goes on to offer. So I think we'll bring to a close in just a moment. We've had one comment that's come into the chat that I'd just like to read out here before we close. Our next panel session will begin at 5 p.m. UK time, speaking about the Asian art market. More of an in-conversation with two speakers joining us from Christie's in New York and Sotheby's in London. But before we close, I want to read out a message that's come into the chat from one of our first ever Alphawood scholars, Riksmi Yen, who writes, "Hello from Cambodia. I want to reiterate my special thanks to Dr. Sharrock and Dr. Elgood for contributing to my life's journey, especially paving the way for me into university education. The diploma was and is a foundation, literally, for my educational journey, as it was my first experience ever in a university setting or education. And it was foundational for my understanding of Southeast Asian art history, which continues to be my academic interest and object of curiosity. I wouldn't be where I am today without your help and kind support, for which I am greatly indebted to you both." So I just wanted to put that into the record as the sessions are being recorded. Riksmi, thank you so much for your comment. And thank you all once again for staying with us. We've had wonderful audiences throughout the day, sitting pretty evenly at close to 100 for much of our panels throughout today, and going beyond that as well. So thank you all for joining us. We'll see you in around 10 minutes for our final panel on the Asian art market, where we'll have Olivia Hamilton joining us from Christie's in New York and Edward Gibbs joining us from Sotheby's in London. And I will be the chair of that final panel. So see you very soon. Thank you once again. Catch you in a moment.